thank you for tuning in to YouTube to listen to this What If Project presentation on perspective. I understand that I might be the third or fourth link in a 6-degree chain, that you followed a rabbit hole down the YouTube, whatever it is that you go to, and that's okay if I am. But I would ask one thing of you. Give me 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. If within those 5 minutes you don't hear anything that has to do with you or maybe that you touch on, then turn the channel. Just 5 minutes. So start the clock. This evening I want to talk to you about perspective and the way that we see God at work in our lives. And I think the best way to do that is to put the word perspective in perspective. Over the past 8 months, we've been going through a terrible ordeal with COVID-19. And there's some people over here who say, I don't think it's that bad. The numbers don't seem to work. And there's some people over here that says it's so horrible. And we worry about masks or no masks, and it all depends on perspective. The way that you look at it, the way that you view COVID-19 through a lens. Not to mention the election that we just had and the inauguration that we just had and the horrible things that happened at the Capitol. Everybody views that through a different lens. Some on the left, some on the right, some in the middle. Political, non-political, partisan, non-partisan. We look at things through the left and the right and the center. Let's look at an example. Many of you have been to conferences, or you've been to things at school, or you've been to something that you had to go and visit, and you had to learn something about somebody else. All of you have played two truths and a lie. What if I was playing two truths and a lie? Of course, there's that game that you have to go and you meet with somebody and you tell them two true things about yourself and one thing that is a lie. And you have to figure out, the person has to figure out what that lie is. And I think a lot of that has to do with perspective. Let me give you an example. I'm going to give you 3 statements. You try and figure out which one is the lie. I have the best wife in the world, I have the best kids in the world, and I live in the best country in the world. Now see, here's what happens with those 3 things, right? One of them is supposed to be a lie. But in fact, all of them can be lies, and all of them can be truth. Because from my perspective, I do have the best wife in the world. From my perspective, I do have the best kids in the world. And from my perspective, I live in the best country in the world. 3 truths, 3 lies. Let me give you another example. My name's Derek Hutchison. I'm 52 years old. And 7 years ago, a man relentlessly stalked my family and put them in imminent danger. And after stealing our identity, placed our family on the precipice of financial collapse. Now I know what you're thinking. And all of you are probably thinking the same thing. I know what's coming. Believe me, you don't. See, a lot of the times when you play two truths and a lie, one of the things that you'll do is you'll make that lie so grandiose that people will think to themselves, that can't be the lie, that's got to be the truth. Or maybe that truth is, or that lie is so crazy that has to be a lie. So I told you I'm Derek Hutchison and I'm 52 years old and all of these things about my family, and I know what you're thinking. That has to be the truth. Well, I'll tell you this. That's a lie. Because it wasn't 7 years ago. It was 6 years ago. Perspective. I want you to take a look at this picture. It's a picture of Prince William Prince William seems to be flipping the bird to somebody there in England. But what you really don't know is this picture. And this picture right here is just that the camera is off, and the perspective of the camera makes it seem as if Prince William is flipping the bird to the people of Britain, when really he's not. He's just doing the number 3. It's all about perspective. And I want to talk to you about that tonight. I love chess. I love it. I love to play chess with my son-in-law. I consider myself a pretty good chess player. But he's always better than me. I don't know why. He just is. I think I've played longer than he has. But he always seems to get me. And sometimes I wonder why. And then I realized one point, I watched him. I watched what he did. I watched how he played, and this is what I realized. My son-in-law is able to see the whole board. Now, what does that mean? When you play chess, obviously, move by move by move, you always need to be thinking 3 or 4 moves ahead. And if you're not, then you're going to get beat. My son-in-law has an uncanny ability to see the whole board, to know what I'm going to do before I do it, and to counter anything that I try to do against him. And so I lose a lot. And I can't stand that. Seeing the whole board. I want to share with you something that happened to me that has to do with chess and seeing the whole board. I run into this a lot. As a former pastor, a lot of my friends will listen to me speak, and a lot of people will talk to me, and I'll say things like this: I talk to God a lot. And they'll look at me and they'll say, of course you talk to God a lot. It's called prayer. And everybody's fine with that. And I say, you know what? I talk a lot with God, and God talks a lot to me. And then you begin to get the silence. And they'll say, what does that mean? And I'll say, you know, God speaks to me in dreams. Uh-oh. Right? That's what happens. I don't know why it makes people so unnerved to think that God might speak to people in dreams. He did it with Isaiah. He did it with Joseph. He did it with Moses. He speaks to him all the time through a bush, through a dream, through a loud, thunderous voice. And I don't understand why people get so upset that when you talk to God, you're obedient and holy. But when God talks to you, you're crazy. Doesn't matter which one it is. God speaks to me in dreams. I talk to God in dreams. We have a relationship through dreams. And one of the dreams that I have is of playing chess with God. And I have learned so many things about playing chess with God. And I want to share some of those things with you. "20 years ago, I was diagnosed with a mass in my head. And I went to the doctor. I started to have a tremor. I started to have headaches. I started to lose my vision. I went to the doctor and they said, there's something in there that isn't supposed to be in there. And so we went into surgery. We took it out. A year later, we had to go back in and take it out again. And then right after that, we had to have a third surgery. After that, I was in constant pain. This was 20 years ago. I had a young daughter, I had a young son. I had been married for a few years, was trying to be the best father that I could be. And all of a sudden, my life was thrown into this tumultuous roller coaster of a ride. Perspective. I blamed God for that. And during that time, during the time that we were trying to struggle through and be a young family, and I was trying to be a father, yet I couldn't because I always had to lay down because I was in so much pain, we as a family came up with a verse, Jeremiah 29:11. And Jeremiah 29:11 says this, "For I know the plans that I have for you, says the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future." And we hung on to that scripture. We were sure that God had a plan for us. And during my time and my dreams with God, He brought that up. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that I'm sitting across the table or the chessboard from a man in a white robe and a long beard sitting there looking very grandfatherly. But that wasn't how it is, or wasn't how it was. Just a man that I knew to be God, teaching me about chess. And as we played, he asked me questions, and I would move. "Derek, why did you have so much anger towards me when we went through that whole brain surgery thing?" And I'd say, "I don't know, God, it seemed like you abandoned me." And I would hear this, "Derek, see the whole board." I think it's important that we look at Jeremiah 29:11 quickly, because I think so many times people use that verse in error. We apply it to something in our life that really doesn't apply. So I want to real quickly look at context and content of Jeremiah 29:11. Let's look at the context. Obviously, we have the Israelites who were coming into the promised land. God had given them this land. And He had promised them, and He said, "This is the land that I wanted you to have." And they went into this land, and then they began to lose their minds. They didn't worship God anymore. They started doing things that the pagan countries started doing. The pagan civilizations came in, and everything went to hell in a handbasket. God took those people and He let them be moved into exile. They were taken out of their land for 70 years. That's the context. The content is this. If we really want to understand Jeremiah 29:11, if we want to have perspective on it, if we want to be able to see the whole board, then we have to look at the content. And the content is this. During those 70 years, God said to them, "I want you to have children. I want your children to get married and have children. I want you to build gardens. I want you to enjoy yourself. I want you to pray for your captors." Pray for your captors. Because if their welfare is good and if they thrive, then you thrive. Can you imagine being somebody in the midst of being in exile and hearing that from the prophet Jeremiah? Can you imagine being in such pain and agony and sadness? And Jeremiah the prophet comes up and says to you, "You better get ready because you're going to be here for a long time." And of course, we as Christians want to say this. I'm just going to pray my way out of this one. God wants me to prosper. He said that. He wants me to have great things. He wants me to have a hope and a future. And so there's no possible way that God will leave me here for 70 years. Bad things don't happen to good people. And I want to say this to you, that that's not what God said to them. Because sometimes we can't believe our way out of things we've behaved ourselves into. I want to say that again. We can't believe our way out of some of the things that we've behaved ourselves into. What does that mean? The people of Israel were going through this exile because of the way that they behaved. They had turned their face away from God, and God said, I'm going to let you be taken into exile. There are consequences to our actions. Now, I didn't put the tumor inside my head, but it was there. And because of that tumor, because of the surgeries, I experienced pain. And every day I would say to God, you have to get rid of this pain. I can't take it anymore. And he would say, I know it. I know it, Derek. Give me one more day and I'll do it. And he kept moving that day and day and day. And what I really realized was that God was saying, you're going to have to go through these things. You're going to have to go through some pain. Many times, God would sit across from me playing chess and ask me more questions. Derek, why do you get so angry with me when bad things happen? I don't know. It seems like if you were a loving God, you would take better care of your people. Oh, Derek, see the whole board. Now, earlier I was telling you 2 truths and a lie, and I know what you're thinking about yourself. You probably stayed on this YouTube channel just to find out what happened to me and my family, because we all love good stories like that. And what I'm going to tell you is, if you want to know what really happens, you can read my book that hasn't been published yet. I've written down all the things, and soon, someday, I'm hoping that will come out. But needless to say, bad things happened to us. Terrible, awful, horrible things. I had felt like we were in the promised land of God. Things were going well. I was getting over getting used to the things that I had to deal with my head. My kids were growing up healthy and happy. My marriage was good. It really felt like God had led us to that promised land. And then the bottom fell out of my world. And there are some times in anxiety and depression, in doubt and in fear, it seems as if you are exiled from the promised land of God and sent to a place where God can't even land a promise. And that's what it felt like for me. After all of this happened, we exiled ourselves to another town. And we began to live and try and rebuild and resume what had happened to us as a normal life. And in my dreams, I would hear God say, what were you thinking about when all of these things were happening? Not you, God. Why did you do that? Oh, Derek. See the whole board. See, that's the hardest thing that we have, isn't it? It's the hardest thing that we have to do is to see the board. But through those dreams, through those conversations that I had with God, I learned some things, and I want to share them with you. I always want to hold on to Jeremiah 29:11. I want to know and I want to hope that God has a plan for me. A plan for a bright future and great hope. But I learned some things from God and playing chess. I learned that God is always at work. See, one of the things that you have to do when you're playing chess is you always have to be thinking about what the next move is going to be. Not just yours, but your opponent's. And so even when it's not your turn, you need to keep doing things. You need to be thinking. You need to be looking. And what I found out was, even when it didn't seem that God was doing anything, He was doing something. See, there were a lot of times that I thought, why don't you get up off your lazy butt and help me with this, God? I can't believe that you would let us go through this. And through my lessons of chess with God, I found that God was always at work, always moving, always setting up things, always encouraging me to advance and to think. God is always at work. The next thing I learned is that when we are resting, we should still be thinking. I remember very clearly a conversation that I had with God across the chessboard. And He said, Derek, what are you thinking about when it's my turn? And I said, nothing. Maybe what I'm going to do next. And He said, really? Is that what you think about when it's my turn and when it's not your turn? And is that what you're doing? You're thinking about what maybe I'm trying to do? And what I realized is that I wasn't doing that at all. See, when I was at rest, when I was in that sense of anxiety or depression, when I was trying to figure out what we would do in our lives, in our financial life, in our spiritual life, in our daily life, finding a job again. All of those things, I realized that God was saying to me, you know what? You missed me. I was working in your life and you didn't see it. I was getting ready to do that next move and you missed it. Oh, Derek, see the whole board. I learned that God is always at work and that when we are resting, we should still be thinking. And I learned this. I learned that God is always with us. Is that God is always with me. Could it be that there is a God who loved us so much that He gave His only Son so that we could have a relationship with Him, not so that we could have everything, not so that our lives would always be prosperous, not that our lives would always be good, but that sometimes we'd have to spend 70 years in exile, but that He has a plan for us. That He sent His Son to die on a cross so we could reconcile ourselves to Him. Not just in this world, but in the next world and the time to come in all eternity. And one of the things that I learned very clearly, and He taught me very clearly, I can remember Him sitting and saying to me, Derek, what's your greatest challenge? And I remember saying, you. You're my greatest challenge, God. I don't get you all the time. I don't understand you. And He said, Derek, you want to see the whole board? You want to know what your greatest challenge is? And I said, yeah. And I think this is the greatest challenge that all of us as Christians face. I think that if we could overcome this, we would have the best opportunity to live a life that's fulfilling, that live a life that is forward-thinking, that would live a life that is looking for what God is doing. Because the greatest challenge that we face as Christians, I believe, is believing that everything that God does, He does because He loves us. Everything that God does, He does because He loves us. I didn't say every good thing that He does because He loves us. Everything that He does. When He allows you to go through brain surgery and have 15 to 20 years of pain, when He allows terrible things to happen to your family, when loved ones die, when disease comes about, when finances drop, when family problems rise, when your son or daughter leaves your home because of some drug problem. Everything that God does and allows, He does because He loves us. And if we could only see that, if we could only believe that, if we could stop for just a moment and get down real close and look and see what God is doing in this great game of chess, and to say, oh, you moved there, but you did it because you love me. Our greatest challenge is believing that everything that God does, He does because He loves us. And finally, I learned this in my dreams and my conversations with God. God's a really good chess player. The moves that He makes are made for a reason. The things that He does in our lives are done for a reason. Everything that God does, He does because He loves us. I want to leave you with this story. Many of you might know the Christian singer Danny Gokey. Danny Gokey sings a song, it's called Tell Your Heart to Beat Again. And he shared a story, and I saw this story and he shared it, about kind of the genesis of that song. If you haven't heard it, after this, go and see it on YouTube. He said it was the story of a woman who had to have heart surgery. And she was on the table, and the doctor, the cardiac surgeon, had just finished everything that he was supposed to do, had just fixed the heart, and then as most cardiac surgeons do, and as most heart surgeries go, they had to restart the heart. So they went to shock it, and it wouldn't start again. He shocked it again, and it wouldn't start again. He shocked it again, and it wouldn't start. The doctor knew that he had done everything that he was supposed to do. There wasn't anything wrong. There wasn't anything that he needed to do. But the heart wouldn't start again. And as Danny tells the story, this heart surgeon who had done everything that he could possibly do and had thought about everything that he could possibly think of, standing there in front of this woman whose heart had stopped. He had fixed it, and then he was trying to start it again. The doctor did something that he had never done before. He bent down and got right up to the face of the lady that was lying there on that gurney. And he said, "Ma'am, I've done everything that I could do. I fixed your heart. There's nothing wrong with your heart. But I can't start it back up." ma'am, you're going to have to tell your heart to beat again. Danny tells that story, and just moments after that, her heart started beating. I wonder if we're not like that. I wonder with all the things that we've gone through in our lives, all the ups and the downs, the peaks and the valleys, the joys and the sadness, the triumphs and the tragedies. If God isn't saying to us, I've done everything that I need to do for you, Derek. I've fixed your heart. Your heart is good. But you've got to tell it to beat again. To put it differently, see the whole board, Derek. See the whole board. I want to leave you with this. God has provided you with everything that you need to succeed in serving Him. Life is full of triumphs and it's full of tragedies, trust me. If I could give you any advice, if I could tell you how you experience God, it would be this. Stop concentrating on the little things. Stop concentrating on the peril that you are in and start focusing on the possibility of where God wants you. Stop for a moment and look at the whole board. Because the pieces are set. The game is on. And it's your move.